Millionaire takes his mother to the park, but finds his ex with 3 babies sleeping on the bench. Late spring in Seattle always carried a sense of hesitation, as if the city had never quite chosen which season it belonged to. The sky stretched in a gentle gray, pierced occasionally by thin beams of sunlight that shimmered across Green Lake's still surface like a time-worn mirror. A faint breeze carried the scent of coffee from a nearby cafe, blending with the rhythmic footsteps of joggers moving along the damp path. Ethan Cole walked slowly beside his mother. Ever since he sold the health tech company he had spent 10 years building, he felt like an actor trapped in a role that no longer fit, victorious on paper, hollow underneath. For 7 months he had lived with an emptiness he had no name for. "You're thinking too hard again," Margaret said, her voice soft yet firm enough to bring him back from the fog in his mind. "I'm fine," he replied, though the exhaustion in his tone betrayed him. "Everything just hasn't settled." "Success can be loud," she murmured, watching the ripples dance on the lake. "Loud enough to drown out your own voice, and after the divorce, you've been walking forward without knowing where forward is." Ethan exhaled. The mention of Bella still scraped at him like a wound refusing to close. 7 years of marriage filled with clashes over time, ambition, and unspoken expectations, followed by a quiet signature on divorce papers that freed them and broke them at the same time. "Remember when you were little?" Margaret pointed toward the pier where kayaks rocked gently against one another. "Every weekend you begged your father to bring you here. You loved that wooden boat he made." A faint smile touched Ethan's lips. "Back then, all I cared about was keeping it from sinking. And you were happy in the simplest way." She paused, then added softly, "Happiness isn't in the season of life, sweetheart. It's in the people we let walk beside us." Ethan was about to respond when he stopped dead in his tracks. Beside the walkway sat an old wooden bench, weathered by years of sun and rain. On it, a woman lay slumped in exhausted sleep, her head tilted to one side, her hair messy and half covering her face. Her breathing was uneven, as if her body had long surpassed its limit. Next to the bench stood a triple stroller. Inside were 3 sleeping infants, their tiny chests rising and falling steadily, oblivious to the cool, gray afternoon around them. Everything else, the wind, the voices, the footsteps, fell away, blurred into nothing. Ethan stepped closer, his heartbeat pounding like a fist against his ribs. And then he saw her face beneath the muted light, thinner, paler, drained to the point of fragility, but unmistakably her. Isabella Reyes. Bella, his ex-wife. "Oh my God!" Margaret breathed behind him. "Ethan, is that—" "It's her," he whispered, his throat tightening. "Impossible." Bella was supposed to be in Barcelona, rebuilding her life, chasing the dreams she once spoke of with such conviction. She could not be here, alone in Seattle's chilly dusk, with 3 newborns she had never mentioned in the past year. 3 babies. 3, not 1. Ethan felt something inside him twist sharply. He stood frozen between the mist-covered lake and the worn wooden bench, with his mother at his side, her eyes full of empathy, urging him toward a truth he wasn't prepared for. And his heart hammered wildly, as if it already understood that this moment would change everything he thought he knew about his life. Time seemed to stretch unnaturally, each second lengthening as Ethan stood facing the old wooden bench. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud, sharp, almost echoing through the park. Bella remained motionless, her face drained of all color under the muted evening light. The 3 newborns in the stroller stirred softly, their tiny brows scrunching as if shrinking from the cold breeze drifting across the lake. "Ethan," Margaret whispered, afraid that even a stronger breath might shatter the moment. "You need to do something." But he couldn't move. Something inside him, a tangled mix of shock, fear, and memory, held him still. He wasn't prepared to see Bella again, not like this. not exhausted, alone, and certainly not with 3 infants beside her. "Why?" he murmured to himself. "What happened to you, Bella?" Bella woke as if rising from the bottom of a dark dream. The muted gray light of Seattle filled her vision first, and then his face. Ethan stood there, close enough to touch, yet separated from her by a distance carved out of months, choices, and silence. Shame, fear, and sheer exhaustion rippled through her all at once, making her wish she could close her eyes again and disappear. "Bella?" Ethan said softly, like someone afraid a louder voice might make her vanish. She jerked upright on instinct, but swayed immediately. The 3 infants stirred at the same time, releasing weak little cries. Bella fumbled to quiet them, lifting one baby with shaky arms. Her movements were clumsy, but the tenderness in them struck Ethan with unexpected force. He had never seen her like this, fragile, trembling, yet cradling those tiny bodies as if they were the last meaning in her world. "Let me help," Ethan reached out. "No," she shook her head. "I can do it. I'm just tired." Margaret stepped forward and gently took one of the babies. "Sweetheart, no one this exhausted should be doing everything alone." Bella closed her eyes, humiliation burning hotter than the evening chill. "I didn't want to see you like this, Ethan. I didn't want you to look at me and—" "Bella, tell me what happened." Ethan knelt beside the stroller, eyes locked on the 3 tiny faces. "Why are you here? And the babies, are they—" Bella stared down, fingers tightening around the edge of a small blanket. She drew a long breath, then let it out, as if releasing the last bit of strength she'd been clinging to. "After the divorce, I went to Barcelona," she began. "I brought the tech proposal for a support platform for single mothers. And I found an investor, international, kind, generous. I trusted him." "What happened?" Ethan asked. "He disappeared." Her voice cracked. "With all the project funds, with my savings, I lost everything. No home, no visa, no options." She let out a broken laugh. "To survive, I worked night shifts, cleaning in a hospital. And that's where I met the babies." The 3 infants stirred again, blinking up at the world with unfocused eyes. Bella touched each tiny cheek gently, her expression softening in a way that hurt to watch. They belonged to a teenage immigrant girl. No family, no documents. She couldn't keep them. Everyone treated it like a system problem. But I couldn't let them vanish into paperwork. I requested emergency guardianship and came back to the U.S. Ethan stared at her, stunned. "You've been living in the park?" Bella nodded faintly. 3 days now, waiting for a spot in a shelter? They said it could take a week. A cold wave crawled up Ethan's spine. 3 days. 3 infants. In Seattle's damp early spring cold. He had no words. Margaret did. "No child sleeps outside in this family, not while I'm breathing." Bella's eyes widened in disbelief, as if she didn't trust that kind of protection was meant for her. A storm of emotions surged inside Ethan: fear, anger, pity, confusion, and something else he couldn't yet name. "Come with me," he said finally. "My penthouse on Fairview is empty since the sale. Stay there. We'll figure out everything else later." "Ethan, no. I don't want to burden you. I don't—" "Bella!" He met her gaze. "No child sleeps outside, especially yours." Silence stretched between them. Then Bella nodded, slowly, accepting because she no longer had the strength to refuse kindness. At the penthouse, the babies were laid on the sofa, wrapped in thin blankets. Bella hovered at the doorway, shivering, afraid to step further, as if moving deeper into the room meant admitting she needed help. Margaret, meanwhile, was already flicking on lights, opening cabinets, scanning the kitchen. "We need diapers, formula, bottles, warm blankets, newborn clothes. Ethan, go buy them. Now." Keys in hand, Ethan glanced at Bella one last time before leaving. He didn't know what awaited him, but one truth had settled heavily and irrevocably inside him. Something in his life had shifted, quietly but deeply enough to turn his entire world in a new direction. When the penthouse door closed behind Ethan and his footsteps faded down the hallway, Bella remained frozen in place. The quiet inside the spacious apartment made the soft breaths of the 3 infants sound impossibly loud, like a reminder that from this moment on, her life had taken a turn she couldn't predict. Margaret placed a gentle hand on Bella's shoulder, making her flinch slightly. "Honey, sit down. You're not alone anymore." Bella wanted to believe that, but months of survival had carved deep grooves of fear into her heartbeat. She inhaled slowly, taking a few hesitant steps farther inside, as if navigating a room filled with fragile memories and new uncertainties. Only a few hours later, Ethan's perfectly arranged, almost impersonal penthouse had transformed into a chaotic daycare. Temporary bassinets cluttered the living room, bottles piled in the sink, diapers and warm cloths scattered like debris from a miniature storm. The scent of baby powder mixed with the aroma of Margaret's brewing coffee, creating a warm, strangely comforting blend. Ethan returned carrying 2 oversized bags, and the moment he saw the scene, he froze. "Oh my God, when did my penthouse turn into a daycare?" Margaret didn't even look up. "Since you decided to do the right thing, now hand me that pack of diapers." Ethan surrendered with a sigh and stepped into the battlefield of bottles and blankets like a rookie soldier. But then, something unexpected happened. He began to learn how to heat milk without burning fingers, how to change a diaper without startling a baby, how to hold each child properly. Every time he fumbled and dropped a wipe or struggled with a tiny button, Bella felt the corner of her mouth twitch upward despite herself. Ethan noticed immediately. "Did you just smile?" "No," Bella replied quickly, though her ears turned noticeably pink. Margaret seemed reborn. She sang old lullabies Ethan had never heard, but that softened the entire room instantly. She knew which baby preferred being held upright, which one needed to be pressed close, which one only slept when patted gently on the back. Watching her was like watching someone reclaim a rhythm of life they thought they'd lost. Bella felt gratitude tangled with shame. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. Margaret looked at her with a warm, unwavering gaze. "A burden is when we abandon each other. This is a family learning to heal. Do you understand?" The words left Bella quiet for a long time. Later that evening, after Margaret put the babies to sleep and the room dimmed under warm yellow lights, Ethan approached Bella. "I want to ask about your project in Barcelona," he said, direct and calm. "The platform for single moms. Can you tell me more?" Bella hesitated, staring down at her intertwined fingers. "It's a platform to connect. Flexible work options for single mothers, shared childcare costs, mentorship for those starting over. A community I wished I had." Ethan paused. "Do you have the code, designs, wireframes?" "Yes, all in the cloud. But—" She lifted her eyes, guarded. "Ethan, I don't want to depend on you anymore." "It's not dependence," he said quietly. "I want to see it because it matters, because I see real potential." Bella didn't answer, but she didn't refuse. Later that night, after Margaret slept in the guest room and the penthouse was filled only with the steady breathing of the 3 babies, Ethan stood in the doorway watching Bella rock the smallest child. The golden lamplight highlighted the exhaustion on her face, layered with a quiet strength that struck him deeply. Something inside him shifted, a silent movement so profound it nearly stole his breath. Fragments of old memories rose. Evenings when they talked about the future, arguments that stretched until dawn, words left unsaid, pains he thought had faded. All swirling into one question he didn't dare speak. Could this be the second chance life was trying to give them? There was no answer yet, only Bella gently patting a tiny back and his heart, no longer as empty as it once was. The next morning, when Seattle's gray light had just begun slipping through the thick clouds, Ethan still heard the question echoing in his head, the one he hadn't dared answer the night before. Was this the second chance life was quietly placing in front of him? He wasn't sure. But he did know one thing with absolute clarity. Bella's project wasn't just the emotional whim of a desperate woman. It was a real product, structured, thoughtful, filled with potential. And that was something he knew how to handle. He sat at the kitchen table, Bella's code and mock-ups open on his laptop. Bella herself had fallen asleep on the sofa, one of the babies curled on her chest, while the other two were watched over by Margaret in the next room. Ethan looked over and saw Bella's hair spilling over her shoulder, her sleeping face still marked by the traces of worry she had carried for months. He turned away quietly, typed quickly, and sent an email to the only two people he still trusted in the tech world, Malik and Trina, his former tech lead and system architect, the two who had built the company with him in its earliest days. After the acquisition, they now worked for the parent corporation, while Ethan kept only an honorary advisor badge, with building access and permission to use meeting rooms when needed. An hour later, Ethan walked into the tower he once ruled as CEO. The sensation of stepping through the rotating glass doors was strange enough to make him pause. The receptionist still smiled. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," as if nothing had changed. But he knew better. This place was no longer his kingdom. In a glass meeting room overlooking the overcast sky, Malik and Trina were already seated, laptops open. Ethan connected his device, presented Bella's concept, and opened the prototype. The atmosphere shifted screen by screen, from polite skepticism to focus, then to genuine excitement. "The onboarding flow is surprisingly smooth," Trina said as she scrolled. "The way she categorizes single mothers by support needs is clever. The recommendation logic, based on location, schedules, contribution capacity. This could scale nationwide," Malik added, tapping rapidly to check architecture. "She built all of this herself?" "Yeah," Ethan replied, trying to hide a strange, quiet pride. "While working night shifts cleaning a hospital." A short, heavy silence followed. Trina exhaled. "If you don't invest in this, someone else will. This idea could become the poster child for any corporation chasing social responsibility points." Ethan was about to answer when a soft knock sounded at the door. He turned and felt his stomach drop. Gavin Pike stood there, wearing that half-smirk that was more scar than expression. Tailored suit, takeaway coffee in hand, he looked like a man who believed every room existed solely for him. "I knocked, but I guess you three were too busy saving the world to hear," Gavin said, stepping in without invitation. "Relax, Ethan. I'm just here for an executive meeting upstairs. Funny to see you still like using this room." Malik and Trina exchanged irritated glances and slipped out, leaving Ethan alone with the one man in the industry he genuinely despised. "I hear you've been busy," Gavin said, lounging back in a chair, eyes gleaming with cruel curiosity. "Living with a woman and 3 babies. News travels fast. You always did know how to keep the rumor mill entertained." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What do you want, Gavin?" "Straightforward. I like that." "Shut the—" Gavin set his coffee down, nodding toward the open laptop screen. "The app? The Single Moms platform. You're testing it? Or, more accurately, thinking of investing in your ex-wife?" Ethan stayed silent, but the silence was enough. "I'm here to help you avoid an emotional scandal," Gavin continued, voice sweet as honey laced with poison. "You're still the golden face of health tech, an advisor, a public figure. If the media learns you're funneling money into your ex-wife's project while her 3 babies sleep in your penthouse," he clicked his tongue, "they'll throw a week-long feast." Ethan's voice came out sharp, honed like a blade. "What's your solution?" "Simple." Gavin smiled. "Let me fund it. My company takes the lead. I absorb all the PR risk. I take it global. You stay clean. No one accuses you of mixing business and personal affairs." "You know nothing about this," Ethan said. "Nothing?" Gavin laughed. "Ethan, I was her investor in Barcelona." The room suddenly felt too small. Ethan stood, the scraping of his chair loud enough to sting the air. "Explain," he demanded. Gavin shrugged as if discussing an afternoon drizzle. "She came with a good idea and that fiery passion. I gave her capital, workspace, opportunity. I suggested a more comprehensive personal partnership. She refused. Principles, morals, all that nonsense. So I pulled funding, left paperwork that made her look like she'd misused funds. End of story. No one died." Ethan felt heat rise through his entire body. "You call that business?" "I call it reality," Gavin replied, narrowing his eyes. "And you're too soft. She's already brought you down once. You'll let her do it again?" "Get out," Ethan said, voice so low and lethal the room seemed to freeze. "Now!" Gavin picked up his coffee, still smiling. "Think carefully, Ethan. Everything she touches drags you down." The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Ethan alone with the low hum of the air conditioner and a fury so sharp it made his hands tremble. He felt a sick twist in his gut, not just at Gavin, but at the unbearable truth that he hadn't been there when Bella needed someone to shield her. When Ethan returned to the penthouse, the sky had deepened into a heavier gray. Bella was in the living room changing a diaper, her movements slow, her eyes unfocused. One glance at Ethan's face, and she knew. "You met him," she said, not a question, just a statement. Her fingers froze mid-fold. Ethan stepped closer, voice hoarse from restrained anger. "I didn't know. I never imagined he—" "Ethan," she cut in, eyes wet but resolute. "I know exactly what kind of man he is. I survived enough to understand." She inhaled shakily, lips trembling. "He suggested an exchange. Private dinners, unnecessary business trips. When I refused, the money slowed, then stopped. And the emails. The documents making me look like I misused funds. Over there, I was a foreigner. No one stood on my side." Her voice broke. "I lost my project, my name, and my trust in myself." Ethan knelt in front of her, gently holding her shaking hands. "Bella," he said, each word steady as steel, "I'm not letting him win again. Not this time. I won't let him touch this project. I'll invest under my name. I'll clear your record if I have to. This time, you're not alone." Bella looked at him, eyes shimmering with pain and fragile relief. Something between them changed shape at that moment, from two people lost in old mistakes to two people standing side by side, facing the same direction. There were still 3 babies, bills waiting to appear, wounds that hadn't healed. But beneath all that chaos, something deeper, stronger, began to take root. That night, Seattle lay under a thin sheet of rain tapping softly against the penthouse windows, the sound like the slow breathing of a sleeping city. Ethan had slept for barely an hour when his phone vibrated. Not an alert, Bella's call. Her voice was cracked, shaking, nearly breaking apart. "Ethan, Noah isn't okay. I think he's not breathing right." He shot out of bed instantly. 15 minutes later, Ethan burst into the apartment, rain still clinging to his coat. Noah lay in Bella's arms, his tiny body burning like a coal, breath ragged, his cries no longer cries, just desperate, broken gasps. Margaret stood beside them, hands trembling as she tried to stay composed, though terror flickered clearly in her eyes. "Wrap him up," Ethan said, voice steady but eyes sharp with fear. "We're leaving now." They nearly ran to the elevator, down the hall, and into the car. Bella clutched Noah tight against her chest, whispering, "Stay with me. Stay with me. Please." as if she stopped speaking, her heart would shatter. Seattle Children's Hospital glowed bright in the night, and the moment they burst into the emergency room like a storm, nurses rushed forward. "Your relationship to the patient?" one asked while laying Noah on the exam bed. Ethan didn't hesitate. "I'm the father." The word left his lips so naturally he startled himself. But paperwork moved instantly. No one questioned anything, and he knew he had chosen right. Everything after that blurred: monitors, oxygen tubes, doctors speaking so quickly Bella couldn't process any of it. Ethan wrapped an arm around her shoulders, anchoring her as she struggled to stay upright. At last, the doctor stepped out. "He shows signs of a rare immunodeficiency disorder," he said. "It isn't life-threatening right now because you arrived in time, but the condition will require long-term treatment. The costs will be significant." Bella looked as though the air had been ripped from her chest. Her hands dropped, eyes reddening. I don't have anything to give him." Ethan took her hand and held it tight. "Bella," he said, voice low and steady like a vow, "we'll handle this, together." She looked up at him, eyes filled with despair and a fragile wish to believe, but terrified to believe. "Ethan, you don't have to." "Yes," he cut in softly, "I have to." And in that moment he understood. He was no longer doing this out of obligation or guilt or the ghost of their past. He was doing it for Noah, for Lily, for Caleb, because somewhere along the way, without him noticing, they had become his family. And he knew he would never let them fall into darkness again. The days of Noah's recovery in the pediatric wing of Seattle Children's Hospital passed in a quiet rhythm. The steady beep of monitors, the soft white lights, the sterile scent of disinfectant, and the tiny breaths of a baby fighting his way back into the world. Bella sat by his side almost every hour, and Ethan moved around them like a steady shadow, bringing food, bringing coffee, bringing the gentle words that kept Bella from breaking. One evening, after Noah finally fell into a deep sleep and Margaret took the other two babies back to the apartment to rest, Ethan stood by the window, staring at the city lights blurred by rain. Bella looked up and saw something different in his posture. Weariness, yes, but deeper than exhaustion. A fear, a very old one. "Ethan?" she whispered. He was silent for several seconds before turning back. His eyes weren't their usual calm. They held a quiet ache, something buried for years. "There's something," he said, voice low, rough. "You deserve to know it, because things between us are different now." Bella rested her hand on Noah's crib, then sat back down, waiting. Ethan took a long breath. "I said I understood what Noah is going through, but the truth is, I understand more than you think." A beat of silence. Then, "I was abandoned," Ethan said, "when I was 6 months old." Bella froze. "They found me in the ER, just a thin blanket and a scrap of paper with my birth date. No last name, no relatives. No one came back." He let out a short laugh, sharp as a wound. "Margaret. She was a young nurse then. She held me the whole first night. Weeks later, she adopted me." Bella's throat tightened. "I grew up knowing I came from a hospital," Ethan continued, "and I thought, if my own mother could leave me once, anyone could. So I had to be perfect, never mess up, never give anyone a reason to walk away." Bella understood instantly. Every argument from their marriage, every impossible standard, the pressure, the silence, the unconscious control, each piece fell into place, forming a heartbreaking picture she had never seen before. "Ethan," she breathed. He sat down across from her, hands clasped so tightly they trembled. "A few weeks ago, my biological mother contacted me, after the news about the company sale. She said she always loved me, that circumstances forced her to give me up." He let out a tiny laugh, bitter at the edges. "Bella, how am I supposed to know whether she wants to meet me, or the successful man the newspapers write about? The words dropped heavily between them. Ethan spoke again, slowly, each word deliberate. What if I'm only worth loving now that I'm successful? Bella stood, walked to him, then gently took his hands. His palms were cold, like he'd been standing in winter wind. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice threading together everything that had once broken. "You are worth loving because you're you, not because of money, not because of success, not because of what you give others." She placed a hand over his chest. "Because you are you." He closed his eyes and a single tear slipped out. Not dramatic, not loud, just a quiet release, long overdue. In that moment, they both understood. The fractures that once destroyed their marriage, fear, misunderstanding, silence, were being healed. Not by apologies, but by the 3 babies sleeping in white cribs, and by the fragile reality they were learning to face together. They weren't returning to the past. They were rebuilding the future out of the very pieces that once tore them apart. The emergency meeting was called on a foggy morning when Seattle drowned beneath a thin veil of mist that felt like the heavy breathing of a tired city. The conference room on the 38th floor was so silent the tapping of a pen echoed. Ethan walked in with a calm exterior, but inside him was a whirlpool, pulling him between the old responsibilities and the new life quietly forming around him. The board chair began without preamble. "Ethan, we have serious concerns." Another member leaned forward, irritation unmasked. "You're spending a substantial amount of money on emotional impulses. That has no place in a publicly traded company." "The media is starting to ask questions," a third added. "You're living with your ex-wife, 3 children, and your spending is unclear. This directly affects brand perception." Ethan clasped his hands, then spoke slowly and clearly. "I want to establish a fund for single mothers and adoptive children, allocating 25 to 30% of our annual profit." The sentence dropped like a stone into a still lake. Chaos erupted. "This is irrational. Are you trying to commit financial suicide?" "We will not approve this." One member slammed a palm on the table, voice sharp as a blade. "You're letting your personal chaos run this company." Ethan looked around the room, the familiar faces that once built this empire with him, now hard, cold, unrecognizable. He understood he had crossed too far to return, and they were too far to understand. "I've heard you," Ethan said simply, then stood. The door closed behind him like a clean cut through the past. Outside the building, the drizzle fell like silver dust, blurring Seattle into a pale watercolor. Ethan stood there with no umbrella, letting the cold drops streak through his hair and coat. Loneliness wrapped around him like a damp cloak. That was when his phone rang. "Bella?" Her voice trembled with the cries of the babies behind her. "Ethan, Margaret collapsed. I called 911, but the roads are flooded. They can't get through. I don't know what to do." Ethan's heart clenched so hard he had to catch himself against the wall. "I'm coming home." He turned, but another call came in. Gavin Pike. Ethan gritted his teeth but answered. "Make it quick." Gavin's smugness oozed through the line. "I hear Seattle's drowning. Roads closed, traffic dead. Your mother needs emergency care, right? Well, I have a helicopter, ready to lift off." Ethan said nothing for half a second, just long enough for Gavin to continue. "In exchange, you give me Bella's app. No contracts, no signatures. Just say yes, and my aircraft will be outside your building in 10 minutes. Disgust rose in Ethan's throat like something poisonous. He spoke slowly, each word a blade. "Go to hell." "Ethan," he hung up. No helicopter, no deals, no power games. He just needed to get home. Ethan sprinted to the garage and grabbed the portable medical kit he still kept from his volunteer EMT days. The city ahead was drowned in darkness and water. The streets rose from ankle-deep to calf, then to his knees. But he kept walking. Rain stung his eyes, wind shoved against him, but he kept walking. Each step through the storm was a declaration. He had chosen where he belonged. When he reached the apartment, Bella rushed to him the moment the door opened, her eyes red, breath shallow. They just got here. They're trying to stabilize her. Inside, 2 paramedics worked over Margaret. She lay pale and trembling on the sofa, her breathing thin. The 3 babies cried in their cribs, their wails filling the room with panic and helplessness. Ethan dropped to his knees beside her. "Mom." Margaret opened her eyes, weak but warm. "Ethan, you came back." Bella stood behind him, trying to stay composed, though tears streamed down her face. One paramedic said softly, "We've stabilized her for now, but she needs advanced care as soon as the road's clear. Her heart condition is serious." Margaret reached for both their hands. "All this time, watching you 2 care for those babies, seeing the way you stand with each other, I see one thing. This is a real family. Not perfect, not traditional, but a family, and family fights for each other." When the storm finally eased, the ambulance managed to take Margaret to the hospital. Ethan and Bella stood together in the hallway, the white hospital lights bathing them in a fragile calm. "Bella," Ethan said, voice rough like the wind after a storm, "I'm falling in love with you again, not with who you were, but with who you've become." She froze. "I'm pulling out of the company, all of it, every share. I'm done." He drew a breath. "I'm starting the fund for single mothers, and, if you'll let me, I want to adopt the 3 kids," Bella whispered, her voice breaking. "Are you sure? You're not afraid you'll regret it?" Ethan's smile was soft, unwavering. "I've never been more sure of anything." Bella cried, gentle, releasing tears, and threw her arms around him. Ethan held her, steady and certain. Outside, the storm slowly faded, clearing the sky like a sign that everything old had finally washed away, making room for an entirely new beginning. 1 year later, Green Lake carried a completely new face. By the lakeside trail, the Hope Bridge Family Center stood firm, like an answer to every storm of the past. Its glass walls mirrored the calm blue water, and the small sign out front read, "Funded by the Cole Reyes Foundation." Ethan and Bella had built this place with everything they once lost and everything they found again. Circle Mom, the project Bella had nearly sacrificed her life for, now had more than 600,000 users across the United States. On opening day, many mothers hugged her, some in tears, telling her the app had saved them. Bella could only smile while Ethan stood behind her, pride glowing in his eyes. This afternoon, Green Lake hosted another moment, their small wedding. No extravagance, just soft grass, a few close ones, and 3 toddlers tumbling over each other. Noah wobbled toward Ethan, Lily clung to Bella's dress, and Caleb laughed wildly as Margaret helped him stand. Margaret was healthier than ever now. She had become the soul of Hope Bridge, the person every young mother sought out. She held newborns with a steadiness that reassured anyone, and whenever she spoke of their family's journey, her eyes lit up as if she had never lived through a storm. As Ethan bent to pick Noah up, he suddenly froze. Far off, near the eucalyptus trees, an older woman stood watching them. Her face aged, her expression quiet. She didn't come closer. She simply watched for a few seconds, then turned and walked away. Ethan knew exactly who she was, and he understood. She was respecting the boundary he had set, and that was enough. Bella stepped beside him, her hand gently on his back. "Are you okay?" Ethan glanced at the fading silhouette, then down at Noah's tiny hand gripping his collar. He smiled, a warmth so deep even the lake breeze seemed to soften. "I'm exactly where I belong." They held hands, the 3 children toddling ahead, Margaret close behind. Under the golden light spilling across the lake, the family walked away from Green Lake, where heartbreak once lived, where fate intervened, and where a new beginning had finally taken root. One circle closed, so another life could begin.